Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes, just waiting for folks to pile in. Okay, why don't we get going with some introductions to the speakers as well as the session, and then as we go, I'm sure more and more of you will join. So really great to be here today. I'm going to quickly introduce myself and then pass it over to my two wonderful co-panelists. My name is Anya. I'm the co-founder and Chief Operating Officer of Diversio, where we are a people analytics platform that specializes in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We work with global enterprise, including Honda, Disney, I don't know, Unilever, BMW, all sorts of different kinds of organizations. Really excited to be here today. And maybe I'll pass it over to Jennifer.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Huggins. I'm a senior director with Management Leadership for Tomorrow. I work in our employer practice and I focus on organizational change. And I'll pass it to Tina and she'll share a little bit about herself and more about MLT.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tina Gilbert. I'm the Vice President of Employer Offerings with MLT, as we like to call it, and excited to share some of the insights that we have seen by working with employers on thawing the frozen middle.
Awesome. Really, really great to have you ladies with us today. So if we go to the next slide. Wanted to kind of quickly give you an overview of Diversio and kind of what we do. So like I mentioned, we are a people analytics platform. We collect engagement metrics, help organizations with strategy and planning, provide learning resources and complete certifications. That's all to say that we are extremely data-driven, and we're actually going to be bringing in some case studies and examples of clients that we've had and some of the challenges in their respective career progression journeys that we've seen for their employees to add some context and color to the insights that Jennifer and Tina will be sharing with us. So the way that, and if we can go to the next slide. Thank you. The way that we measure diversity and inclusion is we collect data from companies on their employees' backgrounds and identities. So we ask employees, what their experience is across their organizations, and we also ask employees to share with us their demographics. So things like gender, race, sexual orientation, disability, age, mental health, really a wide definition of diversity, and that helps us understand, what are the particular challenges that are faced by certain groups within each organization. Maybe on to the next slide.
I'll give a quick overview of MLT, Management Leadership for Tomorrow. We are a national nonprofit headquartered in Bethesda, Maryland, but we have, in essence, employees and consultants all over. We are focused on advancing racial equity and social justice, and we do that through two main parts. We work directly with individuals, helping to elevate the career trajectory of individuals all the way from sophomores in college, all the way through now that we've been operating for over 20 years. We have alumni in the C-suite and helping them create and curate their platform for leadership. About 6 years ago, we started working directly with companies on their practices. And so basically half our organization works directly with institutions and employers in helping them create equitable workspaces. Next slide. This kind of shows our model. It shows the 4 areas that we're focused on, with the intent that these will work together to help reduce the racial wealth gap, and through that reduction, the second order impact around closing the gaps with healthcare, education, criminal justice, and housing will also take an impact. So we are, our model is really about harnessing the power within the communities to close racial wealth gap, with the overall goal of enclosing many of the disparities that impact communities today. Next slide.
So thanks a lot for that, Tina. That was really succinct and interesting. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to go over what is upward mobility. We're going to explain how equity and inclusion enable upward mobility and are necessary in order for our talent to progress in our organizations. We're going to go through what it takes to diagnose upward mobility challenges. So what prevents people from progressing equitably up in levels of seniority and hierarchy in our organizations. And then we're going to deep dive on thawing the frozen middle. So those people who are stuck in areas within our business that are maybe not at the most junior levels, but also not at those positions of senior leadership. And that's, really going to be the meat of the presentation, because that is, of course, what our session today is called. We're going to talk about our middle managers initiatives, and then how to measure progress over time, and of course, finish with a Q&A. So first and foremost, what is upward mobility? So upward mobility is, of course, the progression of employees to higher positions in an organization. So we are talking about upward mobility in the corporate context here. So specifically within a company or within an employer, how does an individual able to progress to those more senior levels in the organization? Upward mobility or career development are crucial to an employee's satisfaction within an organization, and they're also extremely important for an employee's self-actualizations or feeling like they are contributing, like they're empowered to do their best work. It's incredibly critical for things like retention and employee kind of happiness and productivity. Next slide. We do see that a lot of organizations have significant representation when it comes to middle management. So, for example, white employees accounting for 57% of all employees across the organization, but significantly overrepresented when it comes to middle managers at around 71%. Also, apologies. I believe Jennifer, I just stole your slide. Please, I'm passing it over to you.
That's quite all right. You got the numbers right. This is
all that matters.
Our data slide of showing, like, why are we talking about this, right? The idea of this is a very important group when we think about middle management. It's showing that there's both a gap in representation, and those who are currently there, they need to start understanding the lived experiences of those more junior people so that they can become better managers. Next slide.
Awesome.
One other data slide is we use this slide. Last year we did a survey of chief diversity officers along with some of our partners at Talent Rich Group and SY Partners. And in that, we asked what's keeping CDOs at night. And over 69%, almost 70%, equipping managers with the right D&I skills. And as you see on the other side of the chart, there's a significant gap that chief diversity officers feel that those middle managers, line managers are understanding their role and the impact that DE&I can have in an organization. And so these two slides, both is the least diverse and it is the least prepared, are the reason we're kind of starting to talk about how do we remove these roadblocks and thaw that middle management layer. Anya, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. So when we talk about kind of how do we start addressing some of these challenges, or why do some of these things happen, we definitely need to throw it back to equity and inclusion within an organization. And that will be the underlying cause of a lot of these trends and patterns that we see across organizations. So looking at this next slide, we see that what is equity and inclusion? And just to kind of make sure that we're all on the same foundation baseline here, just a quick definition. So equity is ensuring that we're providing each individual or each employee within the organization with the resources and support that they need to achieve the same outcomes, regardless of their starting point or background. Equity essentially looks at what does each individual employee within our company need to succeed? There's still an expectation, of course, of performance and productivity within our corporations, within our organizations in which we work. But ultimately, you know, assuming we're bringing people in, we want to benefit from having them in the organization. We want to benefit from their diversity of thought and their contributions and, you know, the way that they offer interesting perspectives that help us succeed as a business or an organization. And as a result, we need to make sure that we're setting those people up for success. And that's when kind of our equity considerations come in. That's also where our inclusion considerations come in, which is effectively that everyone is able to speak and contribute and take part in the goals that the organization is working towards. It means ensuring that our people receive fair feedback from managers. It means ensuring that our people feel connected and feel like they're part of a team. All of those considerations when it comes to inclusion are really important to unlocking the potential of our talent. So some interesting, an interesting case study. What happens, you know, when we do invest in equity, when we do invest in inclusion? And it's this case study specifically is from Muse Capital, which is a seed stage venture fund investing in consumer technology and underserved markets. And it advocates for DEI and startups. And some really interesting things come out of their investment. So first of all, 70% of their portfolio has at least one founder who's a woman or immigrant or from a minority background. And they're finding that diverse companies are derive 45% of their revenue from innovation compared to companies who have below average diversity. And innovation really contributes to our ability to enter new markets, to expand our client base, our customer base, and ultimately they're finding, you know, and investors are finding that companies with gender diverse executive teams and just generally diverse executive teams are 48% more likely to produce a better rate of return than homogenous teams. So, you know, on the one hand, we have highly enhanced performance from diverse teams. And then on the other hand, we have challenges when it comes to progression upwards mobility, and full inclusion and equity within organizations. So how do we reconcile those two things? And this is when it comes to kind of fixing the broken rung. Why, you know, another kind of case study of what are some of those challenges and barriers that are faced by employees. So a recent study is finding, and this is based in Canada, but very similar numbers in the US, that while 17%, so almost 20% of employees in Canada are people of color or are women of color, rather, the numbers decrease as you go up to that middle manager level. So it's similar trend to the slide that Tina was voicing over previously, where we see that there's that gap to mobility. And it's interesting because a lot of the time with our employers, when we're having conversations with them, they're saying, okay, it's a recruiting problem, right? It's a problem about bringing people into the organization. But more and more that is shown to be not the case. We're actually making great efforts and strides in our recruiting efforts, being able to, you know, still work to be done, but what we see is that bringing people into the organization is oftentimes not our biggest challenge anymore. It's ensuring that they're set up to succeed once they're in the company. They're recognized for their achievements. They're recognized for their contributions. They're, you know, able to progress. It's that, again, that upward mobility that empowers them. And ultimately, this is what's going to help us with retention. This is what's going to help us with attracting the best talent. All of these things are tied together. So on to the next slide. And again. So taking a look at our representation by corporate role, gender and race, you can see here it's a visualization of a study that was 423 organizations, over 65,000 employees. It was conducted by McKinsey. And you can see that at the entry level, our representation is kind of distributed in a particular way. So we have 35% white men, we have 17% men of color, 17% women of color, 30% white women, actually, relatively speaking, quite close to the population breakdown. So, there's a little bit of fluctuation and variability, but generally speaking, these numbers are close to what we would expect to see in population. But then suddenly, as we progress and we become more and more senior to our, senior director level, vice president, senior vice president, and then C-suite, the numbers start to shrink. And the numbers shrink the most significantly for our women of color and our white women, women of color being first. They also shrink for our men of color, not as dramatically, but ultimately, that piece of the pie is eaten up by our white men, which is, traditionally who we have seen in C-suite roles for quite a long time, arguably forever. And so the question then becomes, why does that happen, right? Like, why is it that our, men of color, women of color, white women are we just inherently not as good at our jobs? Or, which is hopefully more likely, we're just not as empowered to do our best work or not recognized for the work that we're doing. And that's kind of where the disconnect happens, and what it really becomes about us addressing if we want to, again, improve and ultimately get to, the best performance possible for our organizations and our people. Of course, ensuring that our people are happy in the process. So looking at the next slide, this is a really interesting one. So this is actually based on, well, I'm biased, but this is based on a client of ours. We at Diversio work with 8 of the global auto manufacturers. So big brands like BMW, Toyota, Volvo, Hyundai, Mazda, Volkswagen, kind of, etc. I feel like I'm doing a quiz right now on who we work with. But this particular slide is based on the performance of one of these auto manufacturers, obviously anonymized, with whom we work. And so what you are able to see here is, for this particular auto manufacturer, we're seeing that, so there's 2 sort of bars on the graph. There's one for women and additional genders, and there's one for racial and ethnic minorities, generally people of color. And so you can see from at this particular company, at the individual contributor level, they're still lacking in representation of women, but relative to sort of racial and ethnic minorities, they have, decent representation. It actually spikes up at the supervisor level, which is interesting for this particular company. But then there's a precipitous drop. So it drops back for women, it drops for people of color, and all the way, to kind of the kind of the senior leadership level, where it's very, very low. And apologies, I think the labels are actually flipped around. They should be director and then AVP. They're swapped. But you can see the general downwards trend, essentially. And so it's the other component that I want to call out for this particular organization. We can see that they have decent representation of racial and ethnic minorities as a whole within the organization, but they're meaningfully underrepresented for certain particular backgrounds. So specifically, it's important to sort of deep dive what we're talking about when we're talking about people of color, because there's so many different races and ethnicities within that umbrella term. And for this particular organization, they're actually quite highly represented with regards to their Asian employees, but very little representation when it comes to their Black or Indigenous employees. And so disaggregating that becomes very important. And of course, with women's progressions, we can see that their women start off with, decent representation at a certain point, especially at the supervisor level. But then there's a really kind of precipitous drop with no representation at the more senior executive levels in the organization. And so what is the challenge then? The question becomes, okay, what are we sort of facing? What challenges are we facing that are preventing that kind of that progression within the organization? And then that becomes necessary, or it becomes apparent that we need to collect additional data from our employees in order to understand those challenges. And so looking at the next slide, this is where our sort of supplementary data collection comes in. sorry, next slide. Where inclusion metrics become really important. So the way that we assess inclusion in an organization is we look at 6 different metrics. Of course, recruiting and hiring is one. That's sort of, do we have inclusive processes to bring people in? But we know right now that some of our challenges are not necessarily bringing people in. They're sort of empowering them once they are already, in the organization. And so we have an academically validated framework for measuring inclusion. It's actually the first of its kind, and it relies on the other 5 metrics on the screen, which are fair management, which is whether your managers are unbiased towards you, inclusive culture, which is whether your peers value you, workplace safety, which is whether the workplace is free from harassment, workplace flexibility, which is whether the workplace provides you with the flexibility you need to manage your personal and professional obligations, and then career development, which is whether you feel like you have mentors and sponsors within the company, promoting you and giving you opportunities. And so looking at the next slide, it's the same global automaker that we saw within the previous slide, and here we're seeing what are their scores on the different inclusion metrics, and so generally speaking, we can see that there's a lot of differences between scores of the different groups. So we have here in front of us, we have our white women, we have our women of color, men of color, and white men. And we can see, for example, that on inclusive culture, which is a metric that measures, do you feel heard and valued by your team? Our white men are scoring quite highly. They're scoring an 82 out of 100, which is basically an NPS representation of how all of the white men scored. And we can see that's a pretty good score. That's like an A if we were throwing it back to school. But our women of color are scoring a 71. And so that's the lowest score out of the group shown on the slide. And consistently, our women of color are actually the ones that are scoring the lowest on all of the metrics. So you can see that trend, and then followed by our white women. Actually, our white women are scoring a little bit lower on fair management. But regardless, the trend is consistent. So there's a discrepancy between how different groups of employees are experiencing the workplace. And that's what we need to begin addressing through our interventions, right? If we understand that, hey, our women in the organization are maybe not feeling as valued by their peers, that's a contributor to exclusion within the organization. Or, hey, no one's scores on career development are particularly great. Actually, looking at this chart, but that's an opportunity maybe for us to do more mentorship or sponsorship of employees overall. We need to find those patterns in group experiences. We also have, some stats around this again, this is a real company that we work with right now. We saw that 24% of women of color reported not being able to balance personal and professional obligations, compared to 10% of white men and women. That's a huge gap, right? And so, academically, we know that women of color, as an example, are much more likely to be supporting elders within their homes. A lot of that, especially women who are from different cultural backgrounds, as an example, that's a load that they carry. Women generally are still the primary caregivers within their homes, right? So there's an additional sort of demand on their time. And so those are the challenges that can sometimes lead to inequities. And having a company that is a little bit more flexible, that provides a little bit more, support when it comes to nipping out of work, to in and out of work, to kind of pick up the kids or drop them off. It will empower people to be more successful while having those kind of accommodations or those availability, that flexibility offered by the organization. So now this is where we get to the frozen middle, and I pass it over to Jennifer.
Great. Thanks, Anya. Next slide, please. In our experience, middle managers are critical to advancing equity, but yet often they are underutilized and underappreciated. What we find in working with our clients is that middle managers are often feeling weighed down by bureaucracy, administrivia, in addition to their just day-to-day job responsibilities. So oftentimes organizations are maybe allocating some resources to learning and development, but often the middle managers maybe don't prioritize these learning opportunities until there's a need or if they're in crisis mode. So oftentimes our middle managers are facing situations and maybe they're not set up with the strongest people or leadership skills. But what we find is that this is a really powerful and influential level within the organizations. They are shaping the day-to-day experience of a multitude of your employee population, and they have a huge influence over how those employees develop. They're also making key decisions around hiring, promotions, and really the trajectory of careers within many of the population within your organizations. So for us, we really believe that the middle managers and unthawing this group is a critical role. You'll have a huge impact, and we really want to make sure that we're taking the extra care so we can mobilize this very valuable stakeholder. Next slide, please. Based on our work at MLT, over the past 20 years, we've observed two critical factors that we think will help you successfully unthaw the frozen middle. One is around rigorous strategy, and the other is about comprehensive organizational change. So Anya kind of touched on this in some of her slides. Tina and I have spent a significant amount of our career in management consulting. And no matter what challenge our clients may have faced in that space, whether it was an outdated technology platform, if it was a merger and acquisition, a new strategy, or maybe we're launching a new project, strategic planning and rigor is very important. We're always looking at the data. We're always looking at the analysis, right? And so what we find oftentimes with some of the clients is they're not applying the same level of due diligence to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's so important. It's so critical to really understand what is going on within your organization. And as Anya showed, there are so many opportunities to slice the rich data that your organization is sitting on to really help you to put together a robust plan. And our middle managers are often the ones that understand and see symptoms and see persistent challenges that are facing their teams on a day-to-day basis. However, sometimes these leaders recognize that there is a problem, since there's a problem, and they're observing symptoms, but they don't know what to do. And sometimes they just react, but they're not really kind of putting together a plan that's really going to help them take ground in a meaningful way. Some of the symptoms that they observe, and one of the things that we encourage the clients that we partner with is let's move beneath the surface and really understand what's going on. So some of the symptoms that we see middle managers observing is higher turnover in a certain population. But what is driving the turnover changes? Sometimes they observe that some segments of the population may sit a longer time in role before promotion, but what's driving that? Or they may notice the engagement scores, right? Once an organization gains this clarity and they really can dig beneath the surface and understand the root causes, those core challenges that the organization needs to address, that is when they can put together a rigorous strategy, a roadmap that's really going to help them go after those core challenges and help them be less reactive. And that's really where MLT comes in to support our clients. We try to help them break and avoid this cycle of random acts of diversity and stop reacting simply to the symptoms and really get to the core challenges that are facing your organization. On the other side of this equation is organizational change. So organizational change is where we provide that high touch approach and support to middle managers and senior leaders and employees at all levels to help them navigate this journey. Change is not easy for any of us, even those of us that are change practitioners, right? And so it's really important that we activate networks, that we understand power and influence and how that manifests itself within organizations so we can drive understanding. Organizational change requires us to create and deliver compelling messages that outlines the why. Why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important for our organization, for our consumers? Organization also requires you to manage the power and the political dynamics that exists within your organization and even external to your organization. And organizational change requires you not to do everything at once, not to simply be reactive. Really, that rigorous plan that we just spoke about helps you find the right pace and prioritize those activities that are going to drive the maximum value. One of the things Anya spoke about earlier is so many of our clients, they want to focus on hiring and making sure we're bringing enough people in. But is that where you're going to maximize your value? Your value might be on the other side of the equation in retention and making sure that people are having robust careers and developing in an appropriate pace and manner. Organizational change is also about managing and mitigating resistance, and it's about removing the roadblocks, measuring and sustaining the momentum to achieve the goals that your organization puts forth. Organizational change is not one-off training, and that's one of our big mantras at MLT. Change is a human experience, and we need leaders at every level, at the C-suite, as well as middle managers to really successfully change. People want to feel like the change has meaning to them, and that is where middle managers provide a critical role because they are the ones that sustain the change and they make the change stick. Next slide, please. So this slide just outlines a very concise and clear DEI change management approach that we utilize. I recognize there's many other change frameworks out there in the marketplace, ProSci and CADR, but we are just going to try to keep it very simple. I'll highlight the 4 quadrants, and then we'll dig deeper on the subsequent sides. So motivate, understanding. This is about explaining the why of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then helping people understand the new expectations that we're going to have for them at various roles within the organization. Equip is about equipping employees, leaders with the skills and tools that's really going to help them implement the winning behaviors. And embedding is around reinforcing, right? It's about sustaining those behaviors and making sure that we're evangelizing the positive outcomes that we're having and addressing any challenges or pushback that we may receive on an ongoing basis. And measure and reward is about making sure we are making progress, measuring progress, sharing the progress, as well as the setbacks, and rewarding those people that are advancing DEI within our organization. On the next slide, we will talk a little bit about motivate. Now, for me, this is the focus area that's really about helping employees as well as leaders understand what is expected of them and why it's important. And while a lot of times we, of course, focus on the C-suite because the tone is set from the top, we have to also make sure that we have enough time in our plan for those middle managers to absorb what we're asking for them and feel comfortable enough that they are in a position to lead their teams forward. I like to call this phase preparing the climate for change, and leaders drive this in such an important way. Leaders must be out in front, painting a vision of what the future looks like, and they must help those in the organizations beneath them understand why this is a priority, what's the benefit, what's going to be different, and what remains the same. What we see from our experience is that managers are sometimes uncomfortable leaning into diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so that is where the next phase, equip, comes in. And that's where we need to make sure that we've got talking points, coaching, resources, simulation, all the things that we need to make these managers comfortable and ready to lead their team forward. Okay, next slide, on to equip. So equip is kind of the mobilization effort. It is about engaging, it is about enabling leaders and employees with the skills and the tools they need to really implement the winning behaviors. It's very important at this stage that you really understand your key stakeholders, your key influencers. Who are those leaders that are formal and informal leaders across the organization that really can generate momentum and move things forward? This is where you take those core messages that you developed during the motivate phase, and you start making sure that they are communicated in a structured and a consistent way across the organization. This is often also the phase where you see the training come into play, right? But it's never just about the one-off training. It's about really cultivating new behaviors, new capabilities. Oftentimes we see DEI kind of framed in a negative light. No, these are leadership skills, right? We're asking you to develop and lead inclusive teams, right? And so this is not about conversations that are difficult. Maybe they are, but this is about a leadership skill that's important to our organization to win in the marketplace. Next slide, please. On to measure and reward. This might be my favorite area because this is where we start showing that we are progressing and taking ground, right? This is where we start sharing accolades and rewarding people for advancing the work, and also holding people accountable when they're not meeting the bar, and helping understand where the disconnect is. Simply put, if you don't measure it, it doesn't matter, right? In organizations today, we measure everything, right? We know call times. We know how long it takes to pick an order for our customers. Earnings per share, right? We measure everything. So if you go out in front of your organization and you say diversity, equity, and inclusion is important, it's an imperative, and you have no measurement around it, you're sending a loud signal to your organization that it's not really very important. So one of the things that we hear from our clients when we're working in this space is that sometimes managers are unclear how their teams are performing against other departments in the organization or even across their industry, right? So it's very important that we are enabling middle managers as well as senior leaders with dashboards, metrics, right? If we're asking them to take ground, then we have to let them understand where they are today and where they need to move to in the future. And we have to make sure that they are accountable for the outcomes and the results. And on the final slide, which is the embed phase, this is about reinforcing those winning behaviors, right? This is about sustaining the change, sharing the positive outcomes, addressing any challenges and pushback that you're receiving. This is about making sure we have thoroughly rethought our routine and that we're implementing and sustaining this change for the long term. And this is also a critical place where leaders play a huge role, right? Leaders are so critical to change within any organization, right? And your leaders, middle managers, as well as seniors, they communicate more by what he or she does than by what he or she says, right? So really, we are asking leaders in the embed phase to model the behavior that we want to see from inclusive leaders. Another thing that's really important at this point is around decorating the troops and making sure you are rewarding and recognizing leaders who are shining examples of what you want an inclusive leader to be, right? So making sure you're using the carrot and the stick. Those organizations that get this phase right recognize that the spirit of DEI does not sit in a DEI committee. It does not sit in HR. It does not sit with the DEI team. It does not sit with the ERGs. This is all hands on deck. So from the top of the house to the bottom, staff and stakeholders really need to become DEI champions. What we see from our leaders at this point is that, sometimes there's false narratives, false assumptions around DEI that take root. And it's really important that you hold on to those core messages that you created during the motivate stage and address anything that comes up. All right, Tina, I'm going to pass the baton back over to you to walk us through the case study.
So we have put together a case study that brings it all together. From a time perspective, I'm not going to go through each slides. I know that this will be shared with you afterwards, and you can have a chance to go more detail. But if we can advance 2 slides to the page that says our approach, that's what I want to show how all of this comes together. So we were working with a very large energy company, and they had an initiative. They really had a strategy around DE&I, but what they were seeing is as they had moved from design planning into implementation, a lot of the outcomes that they were looking for, they just weren't getting. And when they went back and really looked at the problem, it did resolve kind of in that frozen middle, right? They had done the one-off kind of overview of the DEI strategy and just expected all the middle managers just to get it and to start pushing it forward. And so what we did was we had them kind of first take a pause in terms of their strategy, ensure that everything they were doing was really about the root causes and that they weren't addressing the symptoms. Once we did that, we were able to align kind of 6 core issues with their various programs. One of them that was really about kind of that power of your manager and the way that the manager had in terms of helping you not only get feedback and shape your career in the current stage, where they were the gatekeeper for you pursuing upward mobility. And so we did some very specific training with the middle managers. One, that they understood their role as managers and what they needed to do. And 2, also giving them some insights into the lived experiences of the underrepresented talent. Now, we wrapped around it all the things that Jennifer mentioned in her overview of the framework, right? We found ways to motivate them. We found ways to continually coach not only us, but to enable their leadership to coach them once we were done the initial training. And of course, we found ways to align it with performance plans, recognitions, and sharing those success stories. So if we go to the next slide, at the end of the day, once we kind of created this fully integrated change management approach, you'll see that they had a 1/3 reduction in regrettable departures after implementing this. And the senior leaders really enjoyed that safe space that not only was built during training, but continued after through coaching sessions on where they could go get their answers, get their questions answered, and get the coaching and the ongoing support that they found that they needed many months after the initial training. So there's some more case studies in here. We'll definitely share this material with you, provide you a chance to go through it. And at the end of this session, you can see how to get in touch with us if you have more questions. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Anya.
Thanks so much, Tina. So now that we sort of have these excellent case studies and background around how to actually, start moving the needle and start implementing change within your organization for measurable results, I think that what we want to talk about as well is the necessity of collecting data on a continued basis, as opposed to a one-stop kind of one-hit of data and not going back to it. Ultimately, the idea, of course, is that we want to be able to track our progress over time, and we want to also have some sense of accountability when it comes to setting goals and performing against those goals within the organization. And that only comes with tracking that progress. So if you look at the next slide, How do we see progress over time? The numbers are where it lives. So this slide is again our current state. A slide that we saw earlier in the presentation. This is what we currently look like from a career progression perspective, from a representation across from the junior to the more senior levels of the organization, and the way that that representation shrinks for people of color, women across the organizational pipeline. Now, if we look at the slide after that, this is a visual representation of what we should look like if we start removing those barriers and if we start removing those challenges within organizations. And ultimately, you know, frankly, we want to be moving as closely as possible to representing the communities that we serve. And at the end of the day, that is representation across population. So we should be within those you know, couple of percent within the communities that we're serving. And so you can see, obviously, this looks very different from the state that we're in right now. And so the question becomes, how do we leverage some of those really excellent best practices that were shared by Tina and Jennifer around how to get us here? So looking at the next slide, ultimately, again, going back to our measures of inclusion, going back to our senses of self within our organizations, you can see here that pairing demographics with inclusion metrics is incredibly important for understanding of how do you feel within the workplace. This chart really shows us that the experiences of certain groups of people within companies are much better than others. And so no wonder, you know, if our white men within organizations are feeling really empowered, feeling valued by managers, feeling valued by their teams, feeling, you know, like they're not bullied and safe within the workplace, then it makes sense that, you know, their representation would be more consistent throughout those seniority rungs within the organization versus some other identities. And for example, we can see huge gaps with our women of color and how they're feeling within companies, and gaps with other identities and demographics as well. So I think that that idea of applying our metrics, but then also looking at intersectionality, of course, becomes really, really important to understanding what are the groups of people that are facing the biggest barriers within our companies. We can see that those barriers exist by just looking at our demographics across all of the different levels, but we don't know what those barriers are necessarily without asking our people. And so that's where the two come together. And our goal is to ultimately diversify the upper levels, but our kind of the way that we get there, our method for doing that is through inclusion. Diversity oftentimes is actually the result of having an inclusive organization, especially diversity at the more senior levels. And so, yeah, so I think with that being said, we're coming to the conclusion of our presentation. Would love to open it up for questions if there are any for anyone.
I did see a couple in the in our document. I don't know if there's someone on your end that's gonna review them, or should I just jump right in?
I think why don't we do this? I'll ask the questions and then you can and then maybe I'll ask them to you. It's always nice when someone asks a question. Also thank you for pointing that out. I did not have the document open.
Oh no, you're good.
So first question is, how would you address or advise a situation where middle managers are not buying into DEI even after the business case has been made?
Yes, so this goes back to really where you're going to focus in on the change management perspective, right? And so typically with these, I basically get together, in essence, a group of individuals, both those who are supporters and those who are having some of the acceptance and the buy-in. I typically stay away for those who are the true detractors, because at a certain point, right, those aren't the ones you're trying to convert. You're trying to really focus in on those who are kind of struggling to figure out how this fits into the work and the work environment. So working with that small group, you start identifying those messages, right? You start exploring what the issues are, providing answers, having that dialogue, right? So this is the part where you have to get in there, roll up your sleeves, do the work, and have some of the dialogue. Through that dialogue, 9 times out of 10, you start identifying the key messages that are working to help allow individuals who were in that kind of questionable phase to start understanding the implications to the business and the implications to what it means for moving forward in terms of productivity, innovation, and those pillars of DE&I that continually surface as why we are pushing this forward. And so then what you do is once you have brought that group on board, then you start developing some of the training that I talked about that has both an understanding of communicating those messages, but also sharing some of those lived experiences so people understand why you're kind of shaping some of the stories, some of the messages in that way. So it is a time where you have to step back and ensure that you are really understanding what those issues are, and then through that developing messages. Anything you want to add, Jennifer?
No, I mean, I think that covers it. I think it's really important to hold the line and help people understand that this is a part of how we do business. We talked about embedding, but you embed it into the DNA and the values of your organization, right? And so, it has to become the best word comes to my mind is a non-negotiable. Like, this is how we lead and this is how we do business, right? And so there are various methods of how we reward people and how it can show up in performance management and compensation. I definitely like to lead with the carrot. But I think there are often times where you have to, hold people accountable in ways where it is visible. So you send a clear message that this is really something that is important to the organization.
Yeah, for sure. Next question is, can you share your thoughts on measurement and goal setting in the current legal landscape?
Well, one of the things I really like is your 6 areas of DEI measurement, right? And what you're seeing with those 6 measures is how it relates to business outcomes, right? It's important to understand safety as that impacts retention. It's important to understand recruiting because of the amount of dollars that goes into that activity. It's important to understand creating an inclusive culture because what that means in terms of productivity and innovation. And so if you're sticking with those measures and if you are aligning it with those business strategies that we talked about, then I say, and when you look across the board of others, both on the legal and the D&I side, they say it still aligns with creating a fair and equitable workforce, which is still very much a key principle of our governing documents.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And obviously, again, I'm biased, but I couldn't agree more. So I think we maybe have time to answer one more question, just because I know that we're almost at the half-hour mark. So one of the questions is actually not something I think we can answer right now, but the person who asked it, I would encourage you to reach out to us because we'd actually be able to show you what this looks like. So the question is around, what does a dashboard look like for middle managers? We have dashboards at the division level and team health and the manager level. Would love to see what a best practice dashboard looks like at the individual middle manager level. We can definitely show you this, especially if you're a larger organization. Drilling down on the information becomes really important, and understanding what's happening in different parts parts of the business, because oftentimes, again, especially if you're, several hundred employees or more, like your large enterprise, the challenges and the nuances of what's going on are very different in certain parts of the business. For example, a distribution center will have very different, problem areas than like your HR department or your finance department, just by the nature of the work. So yes, please reach out. And we also have a demo presentation, I think, that's coming up soon. So please you can stay tuned for that as well. But I think the one question that we do have time to answer properly is how does someone diagnose challenges with upward mobility in their particular organization?
Yes. So when we talk about diagnostic, we look at it both from a qualitative and a quantitative perspective. On the quantitative, it is leveraging data and all of the things that your software can bring to life. The more you can dig into that and understand both the current state and even begin to model some of the future state as it relates to the goal. But the diagnostic has a very strong kind of quantitative perspective. Once you have a good understanding, that's where the qualitative comes in. And that's done by, again, rolling up the sleeves with focus groups, interviews, more qualitative type surveys, where it allows you to uncover and really dive into some of the root cause analysis that we were talking about. If you go back to oh my goodness, some of the 5 questions of why, that's an example of really getting in and understanding the root causes, not taking just that observable challenge, but asking those why questions 2, 3, 4 times to begin to uncover really what are some of the issues that are going on. So everything that we said here around the data, and then using that data to then identify where's the parts that you need to go in and start examining and discussing some of the real root causes with individuals.
Yep, couldn't agree more. Well, thank you everyone very much for spending the time with us today. It's been a pleasure, walking you through some of our thoughts, and definitely please reach out to us if you have additional questions or would like to share anything or comment. We're always looking to learn from peers in the space. After all, we're all kind of working towards the same goal. Thank you so much for your time, Tina, Jennifer. It's been a pleasure, always a pleasure, and looking
An
forward
invitation.
to the next one. Awesome.
Take
Thanks,
care,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye now.